Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Keep Truckin' webinar for drivers, requirements for roadside inspections. Thank you all for joining this informative webinar designed for drivers who wishing to learn more about roadside inspections, compliance modes in the post-mandate world, and what the procedures are when you need to signal your HOS data to the authorities should you ever be pulled over for a roadside inspection. We're going to wait just a few moments here to make sure everyone has a chance to join, since we did start at a 9 on the nose, and then we will go through each of these different compliance modes and the requirements for each. Okay. So kicking off with the formal agenda, again, requirements for ELD drivers during a roadside inspection will be covered, including the in-vehicle requirements, because there are, according to the mandate guidance, certain things we need to be wary of while we're in the cab so that we keep the authorities happy, as well as the workflow within the driver app for the DOT inspection mode for ELD drivers. Now, if you're an AOBRD driver, which is an automatic onboard recording device that differs slightly from an ELD, but is closely related, what we'll do here is cover how that is different, as well as how that workflow, how that is different in terms of its requirements, as well as how that is different in terms of the roadside workflow. The last point of discussion will be the codification of the violations, HOS violations, for the full enforcement of the ELD mandate. Again, these are not necessarily new violations, they are new codes for the same guidance. So the regulations have not changed at all, but we just want to make sure that everyone is aware of the type of violation codes that they could expect, if there's ever an issue, and what they mean. Finally, we'll cap off the session with a Q&A open forum. So let's begin with ELD drivers, as that is the most applicable compliance mode. Drivers with an ELD are required to keep several pieces of collateral in their cabs at all times. So this collateral is outlined in the guidance as below. There's essentially 4 points, and both the driver and the carrier are responsible in ensuring that these requirements are met. So these 4 points of collateral are, first and foremost, a driver with an ELD. A DOT officer pulling over the roadside will expect to see 4 things. One will be a user manual that describes how they operate the ELD software and hardware, an instruction sheet for the driver describing the data transfer mechanisms supported by the ELD, essentially the ways in which you can share your HOS data with an authority at the roadside, as well as instructions for the driver on how to produce that for them. There's also a requirement to have an instruction sheet for the driver describing ELD malfunction reporting requirements, record-keeping procedures. So should there ever be a hardware issue with an ELD or a technical issue with an ELD that prevents you from recording and sharing your HOS data, you need to be equipped with a document that describes how you would go about signaling that to the authorities, as well as how that process is managed when the hardware does go down. The fourth and final piece is when and if there is a malfunction with an ELD, you need to have a backup grid, log grid, for reporting your hours of service, even in the case where an ELD or hardware device does go down. And that can be in the form of either the classic paper logs that we're all familiar with, or if you're a customer of Keep Truckin', a call to your fleet manager to switch you to non-ELD mode for a short period of time. We recommend, for ease of use and familiarity, given that we all are used to the paper logs at this point, we're only 4 or 5 months into the post-mandate world. having those on hand is just simply easy for all. Now, again, these 4 points of collateral, if you are a keep trucking driver or customer or fleet, points collateral 1 and 3 are both included in the user manual that every ELD gets from Keep Truckin'. When you order an ELD, that's all included. Point 2, the instruction sheet describing data transfer methods on ELDs, that is also included with every ELD that Keep Truckin' provides in the form of a DOT cab card, which outlines these instructions for both compliance modes, whether you're using ELD or AOBRD. The only thing we do not supply, of course, is the paper logs themselves. Okay, so now that we know what we need to have in the cab with us at all times, what do we do in the app should we be subject to a roadside inspection? If you're running in ELD compliance mode, there is an button on the left-hand side of your app. So those 3 little bars in the top left, that's your menu. You open that menu and you'll see a button for DOT inspection mode. If you tap that, you will get a copy, you'll get a very similar screen to the one that you see here on the right, which outlines how we do communicate that information. So what you will do if you are operating in ELD compliance mode is, unless there's any failure on the authority side, their guidance is we are required to send an ELD output file. So it's the second button there in the middle where it says send output file. What this does is it converts your logs into raw data that the DOT authorities can read when sent to their servers at a roadside inspection. And what the send output file button actually does is it converts your logs into raw data, and that is sent to FMCSA servers, and then they reconvert it into a log that they review on their end. Should, for whatever reason, the output file not be available, this is a very niche case, there are other inspection modes as well where you can review your logs or physically present the device, but again, the requirement is to send an output file. But if you need to send logs internally, either to yourself for tax purposes or to your carrier for whatever reason, or another carrier, you also have the option of sending your HOS information via fax and email. However, I want to stress again, the required format is the output file for ELDs. Now, this process looks very similar, but different in a couple of key ways. If you're running an AOBRD, an automatic onboard recording device, the requirements for the collateral you have to have in the cab are slightly more limited. You need 2 pieces, simply an instruction sheet describing in detail how data may be stored and retrieved from an automatic onboard recording system. Again, if you're a Keep Truckin' customer, this is included in each ELD or AOBRD that you're using from us in the form of the DOT cab card. And then again, your safety net of backup blank driver records, paper logs, paper grids, should there ever be a failure with an AOBRD device. So about half as much, but again, either way, if you're working with Keep Truckin', apart from paper logs, this is included with each device. Now, again, just like with ELD inspection mode, it's a similar process. It's the same menu that you would go to if your fleet was operating under AOBRD compliance mode. Same button, same menu. It's just going to pull up an inspection mode in the app that does not include the output file. AOBRDs are not required to send an output file in a roadside inspection. So you simply have fax or email or physically presenting your device and your app to the inspector. This is also true for ELD mode again, but we use output files there. One thing to note that drivers are very interested in on the begin inspection button here. Again, this is for both modes. If you hold that button down, if you need to present your physical device to the roadside authority, you can actually lock and set a password for your smart device so that any inspecting officer can only see the logs that they need to see and cannot navigate your smart device without entering in your password, because that is all they're able to collect at the roadside. Lastly, here on this screen, you may have noticed when I was covering the ELD inspection mode at the bottom, there is a little medallion here. You'll see in the bottom right on this one, it says you are operating in AOBRD mode. The previous one said you were operating in ELD mode. And this is important because, as we know here, there are two different sets of requirements for each compliance mode, and the officer will conduct their inspection along those rule sets, and then you can signal to them which rule set you're under via DOT inspection mode in the app. And it will tell you at the bottom if you didn't know. Okay, last topic of discussion, the quote unquote new violations. So the intention of sharing this information with you guys is not necessarily to introduce you to any new changes in the regulation. There have not been any new ones so far. And furthermore, all of these violations are outlined in the comments of this video. So if you're on YouTube right now and you go below where you're watching me here, each one of these is outlined. And essentially what these are, they are the formal codes for the violation of the regulation. So if anyone was driving previous to April 1st, these violation codes did not exist. There was only one violation code for the post-mandate world, which did not affect CSA scores or would result in you being put out of service. Now they have more formally codified these violations and added descriptions as to their nature so that you can discern, okay, what do I need to look out for? What did I do wrong if I got a violation, and why? And here is the table and index of that for your reference. And again, this is included below in the video if you wanted to go through each one of these. But should you ever unfortunately be put in a situation where you receive a violation, here's how we discern why. Oh, yes, absolutely. And their severity value is also ranked on the side here, so we can see how they affect scores. Okay, that is the long and short of it. We'd like to turn it over to our audience and address a few questions. So there is a space in the chat on this webinar to enter any questions that might have popped up in your heads as we were going through this presentation. Please submit them there now. I'll take a moment to collect them and address them.
Okay, the first question we have here, it looks like some of you have actually already answered his question for us, but we'll go ahead and review it so everyone can hear. A DOT officer in New York told me I am supposed to have a way to print my logs in the truck. Is that true?
So under, it depends on the compliance mode that you're in, but regardless, the printing requirement is not codified in the guidance anywhere. It is a method, if you're on AOBRDs, to transfer your logs if available to you, but it is not you have to follow and be able to print out the logs on the spot. Again, ELD compliance mode, the printout doesn't even come into play because it is an output file that goes directly to the FMCSA, and that is the means by which they have to gather this HOS data. So the answer is no, that the authority is not familiar with all the correct ways of transferring this data.
All right, next question we have here is, oh, I don't know if this is really a question for us. It says, anyone else here a tour guide or passenger driver? I'm sure there are many here. We actually do come across a lot of team drivers using the Keep Trucking system. If you do have any questions about how to be a passenger driver and utilize the app, you can either go to our Learning Center or call our support line.
Yes, and that's a great point. And also, I know that we are called Keep Trucking, but we do support motor coaches and tour fleets as well, and they are also subject to the mandate. And under several circumstances, but the inspection mode workflow does not change. It is still the ELD output file. If you're required to run an ELD, AOBRD, you can send, fax, email.
Yeah, and he actually had a follow-up question here. It says, how do I switch between employers with my app? So it sounds like he has a couple different contractors or companies he works for.
Yep. Yeah, so this is a little bit outside the scope of inspections, but in order to switch in your app, you would go to your menu and update your carrier information. If the DOT, if you were to join a new fleet, you update the DOT information of the new fleet in the app, and then that fleet would get a request for you to join their authority and operate under their DOT authority on their Keep Truckin' dashboard and accept you, and then you would be a part of that fleet.
Yeah, if you work for multiple companies, then they're gonna have their own account and your own driver profile for each company. So essentially, at this point, you would have to log out of your current driver credentials, and then put in the new ones for the other company. And then what I would do is just keep a printout of the days that you have if you're working under different authorities, just to make sure your hours are adding up correctly for your shift. Okay, next question. Is there any way currently that I can make the app user-friendly for my Spanish-speaking drivers?
Yes, we do have all of our collateral in terms of manuals and usage available in Spanish. The app itself does not have a Spanish proxy at this time. However, it is in development. So I would say the best way to do that now until that version goes live would be to refer to the Spanish collateral, which is available on our website in electronic form if you don't already have it, and have them learn the app and the workflow from those materials.
Perfect. And a follow-up on that, someone says, do you have Spanish webinars available? Maria, that is a great question. We currently do not, but I do have an onboarding project manager here who is fluent in Spanish, and I would be happy to create a driver training for the app in Spanish. So I would say maybe in the next couple of weeks, you should be able to find that on the YouTube channel. I can do that. All right, following up with a new question, what happens when you decline unassigned driving?
When you decline unassigned driving events, they remain unassigned. They remain on the device and the vehicle that they were recorded. And if you are operating in ELD compliance mode, if you're subject to running in ELD compliance mode, the output file that is sent during a roadside inspection will include any unassigned or unidentified driving events for the inspector.
Only for ELD mode.
Yep.
And just to be clear, on our app, you actually can't decline unassigned driving time. So, when you get that yellow bar at the top of your app and you select it, it'll actually only give you an option to accept the driving time. And the only way you can really indicate that they're not yours is by hitting the back arrow in the top left-hand corner. So I just want to make sure everyone's clear there is no actual decline option.
Yep. If you did not do the driving, do not accept it.
Correct. And then what will happen is those miles, if they were not in fact yours, all unassigned driving does go to your dashboard, which is a culmination of all of the driving events for drivers and vehicles and logs. So your fleet manager can assign that driving time to the appropriate driver if necessary. Okay. Next question we have here is, and we have inspection. When we have an inspection, how will we show the DOT officer? Okay, it looks like you might have came in a little bit late, but if we can just go back maybe to that one page and show them. If you want to know how to show the officer, you go to DOT inspection mode, and the way you get to that is tapping on those 3 bars in the top left-hand corner. It'll take you to our menu, and you can click on DOT inspection mode and send the logs or output file on that page. Okay. Next question we have here. As soon as the truck starts moving, it goes into driving mode. Is there a way to correct that?
No. Under the ELD mandate, that is, if we move a vehicle at a speed of 5 miles an hour or greater, that is regulated, mandated HOS driving that has to be recorded. And there's very little flexibility around that in the mandate. That is the whole point, is to capture those driving events.
Okay, we have an interesting situation here, and I think we could talk it through for him. He says, when I'm on the railroad, I'm in yard move mode. When I come off the rail, I've forgotten to switch back to normal on-duty mode, and I can't fix it via insert past duty status. How can I fix this?
This is from Phil. It sounds, Phil, like you are running in a fleet that is subject to the ELD compliance mode. And under ELD compliance mode, if we forget to indicate what type of driving we are doing, we essentially cannot go back and reclassify that driving under a special category such as yard move, personal conveyance, or even in your scenario, from yard move back to standard driving. It is simply a part of the guidance that is designed to ensure that drivers are not able to go back and change their story on the information generated and recorded by the ELD from their engine computers. So we are limited.
Yeah, and think of it this way, Phil. In order to, the reason we can't go back and switch it to driving is because the first half was on-duty driving, and then you still had that continuous driving event where you went to regular driving. In order to switch it, you'd have to stop, become stationary, end that first driving event, which was an on-duty driving event, and then, unselect the yard move mode, then continue a new driving or start a new driving event with regular driving. So you can't take one driving event, make half of it yard move or personal conveyance, and then the other half driving.
Not after the fact, but we can on the fly.
Yeah. All right. A lot of you out there are really excited about Spanish-speaking resources, so don't worry, I am reading these as we're going through the questions. So it looks like some of you are going through the HOS violations and seeing the severity of what those violations are. So yes, please take a look. If you guys go down to the bottom, look at the comments and click more and just read through them. I think that's really important. It looks like some of you are curious about this.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can refer to them here, and they're also available in the inspection bulletin from April 16th on the FMCSA's website for the full story. Again, we are just communicating that info.
Exactly. All right, we have someone here. How do I correct driving if I have to move a mile or less and forgot to put in PC mode or yard move?
Very, very similar to Phil's question here. Again, if we forget and we're subject to ELD compliance mode, we cannot go back.
Yeah, if you guys have questions specifically about your rules, make sure that you guys let us know or indicate which mode you're in, because that really tells us what you can and can't do.
Yeah.
All right. People are asking about this threshold change for the speed. It looks like we have a couple questions coming in. Do you want to just address that briefly for them?
Which speed threshold?
The
5 mile an hour. Yeah. Again, similar question. 5 miles an hour. That's regulated driving if you're under ELD compliance mode rules, and that is not flexible. That is a hard line from the authorities.
Yeah, so if you are in ELD mode, you have to stay at 5 miles per hour as your threshold for when you go into drive on your ELD app. And then for those of you out there who are on AOBRD mode, waiting for the increased speed limit to be moved up to 15. We are not, we usually don't give dates, but I can say we are looking at May as being a release date. So for those of you who want to sneak peek, be on the lookout for an email from us. That'll be a notification of when it'll be available. All right, next question here. After it's over in review. I'm not sure what that means. If I move from my VCL like 5 below, why is on drive? Oh.
If you're moving less than 5 miles an hour and your ELD is recording you as being on drive, then there is either an issue with the engine computer reporting the speed incorrectly to the ELD or with the ELD itself. Because if we only record when we record messages from the engine saying that you're moving at 5 miles an hour or above.
Exactly. So it sounds like the computer of the engine and the dashboard indicator aren't in sync, essentially. All right. Let's see. The next question we have here is, under AOBRD mode, if the truck is in the shop for service, how will we assign that driving as not to any of the drivers?
Oh, you mean, okay. So Daniel, I believe you are asking, how do we assign driver that a mechanic or someone in the shop accrued on a vehicle when the driver wasn't driving, and then you indicate you're in AOBRD mode. The workflow is the same for either compliance mode in the dashboard that a fleet manager has access to. If they will get information on the unidentified driving or the driving not accrued by the driver from that vehicle on that dashboard, and they have the ability to assign it to another driver, or in this case, someone in the shop who's actually exempt from the ELD mandate, so they would be able to assign it and annotate it to an exempt account.
Yeah, and something also to note for the AOBRD fleets out there, these unassigned driving events are going to be collected and stored for your information and for you to have for your records. However, your DOT inspection modes and your audits remain the same, where they ask you for the logs for the last 6 months of specific drivers, and that's all you're required to show. These unidentified driving events will not be on the logs if you're in AOBRD mode.
Right.
Okay, next question. Is there going to be any regulations to the company, the time for load or unload in the time to pick up that take too much time?
I think, yeah. So I think what we're discussing here is the rules themselves and not the inspection mode, as well as the time that a lot of drivers and a lot of fleets that service a wide variety of customers are subject to, depending on how they have to go about their day and gathering loads from clients. This is frankly a question for the authorities on the nature of the rules themselves. But again, we do have special duty statuses available to help drivers manage their clocks in those situations, such as personal conveyance or yard move, which yard move is on duty but not driving time. So it does start your driving window. However, the driving clock itself is not depleted if you are in a yard picking up a load, and that helps as well.
Yeah, you just have to do the best you can with what they have as of right now. The next question, how will I transfer data if I'm in an area where there is no cellular service signal?
Great question. Our ELD device, to be compliant, is not contingent on the driver's perspective on whether or not they have cell, data, or internet service. You could be completely in the middle of nowhere, outside of any cellular network, be pulled over, and so long as you're behaving the same way you do when you have data with your driver and vehicle and your ELD or AOBRD, that data sits on that device locally and is being recorded from your engine computer, so it doesn't need any communication with outside data in order to present your HOS. Also in that situation as well, if you're under ELD compliance mode, the inspector cannot access the server where they pull the output file from either. So you would present the information via one of the analog methods where you physically present the device or email the logs or fax them.
And I do believe, forgive me for not knowing the exact details, I would have to go back, but I believe as long as you can show them the logs, and then I think you have like 24 hours or some kind of time limit where you can send the logs. Is that correct?
I believe so.
But that's something to follow up on as well. I believe that's something that you can take into consideration. All right. Can we remove the 30-minute break requirement? Can we remove it?
Can we remove the 30-minute break? Again, this is the break requirement is the rules itself. We're a compliance vendor. We do not make the compliance framework. That is a question for the authorities that do stipulate the break requirements.
Yeah, you can go into your app, and there are a few cycles that allow you to remove a 30-minute break that's if not required. So if you go into your cycles and you see that as an option, then it is permittable.
Just make sure that you're eligible for that cycle.
Exactly. I'm in Canada, and if I move over 5 minutes, why does it go on ELD? Is there any way to correct? If I move over 5 minutes, why does it? So it doesn't. I think the question here is that you think that since you're in Canada, that you will be able to have different rules, but our system stays the same no matter which, area that you're in. It'll still follow the rules of the ELD mandate.
Yep. Again, unless of course you're on AOBRD compliance mode.
Will this webinar be accessible later?
Yes, absolutely. So at the end of this session here, this webinar will be remain permanently recorded on our YouTube channel for Keep Truckin' for your reference.
Yep. And for those of you asking up follow-up questions for the making a mechanic account or a shop's account, it's the same thing as making a driver profile. Just put instead of, mechanic account instead of the driver's name. You can even indicate that it's exempt. Let's see here. Is it okay to unplug the ELD when we leave our truck in the mechanic shop?
If the vehicle is going to be moving at any time above 5 miles an hour, it has to be installed into the ECM, even if the person moving it doesn't even have a CDL and is not subject to the mandate.
The next question is, at the beginning of the webinar, you went over requirements. Does KT supply all 4?
Yes, with the exception of the paper logs for if there is a hardware breakdown. So anytime you order an ELD or AOBRD from Keep Truckin', all of the collateral except the backup is provided. Again, we do have an electronic way to share logs if you don't have paper logs, but you would need to contact your fleet manager, notify them that your hardware is broken down and that you will be manually logging, and they would have to give you permission to do that on a temporary basis. Again, because we're all familiar with the pre-mandate world and paper logs, we recommend, and also for instances where your fleet manager may not be available or your dispatch may not be available, paper logs would be the easiest. All right, that is it for this webinar. Thank you all so much for joining. Great questions. And again, this will be recorded permanently on this channel for your reference later. Thank you very much.